The scripture says that we should not use our freedom in a way that we can indulge in the flesh. Let me read that from Galatians chapter 5 verse 13. Then I'm going to explain it to you. It says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh." So what does that mean? I want to go to Galatians chapter 5 verse 1, which was going to just shed a little bit more of a light on what this means. It says, "It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourself be burdened again with a yoke of slavery." So we can see that he repeats himself to a certain degree in verse 13 there, where he says, you were set free, but simply don't use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Goes on in verse 2 to explain this indulging of the flesh. He says, "Mark my words, I, Paul, tell you that if you let yourself be circumcised, Christ will be of no value to you at all." So indulging the flesh simply means for Gentiles to be circumcised in the flesh and so feel that they are now standing justified before God in their flesh through circumcision and following the customs of Moses, from where they can appropriate the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ as Lord. So when the scripture says, don't use your freedom to indulge in the flesh, it is not what we traditionally thought it was. It had much more to do with Jewish laws, Jewish customs, wherein they found their identity in their flesh. I find that this is a very difficult concept in the church, and I don't find it in many messages where it is preached as a foundation from where to interpret the scriptures. Yet it was the way wherein Paul wrote. It was the foundation from where Paul wrote all these scriptures. Romans has got so much to do with Jew and Gentile. Corinthians has got so much to do with Jew and Gentile. Ephesians, Philippians. What about Hebrews? I mean, just think of Hebrews. The whole of Hebrews is written in that, it's planted in that seedbed of Jew-Gentile ethnicity, wherein justification is in the flesh. If we would say that there's a country that only allow a certain ethnic group to be part of that country or citizens of that country, how would I then become a part of that country? What justifies me and what gives me the right to be part of that country is to be part of a certain ethnic group. Now, if there was a certain ritual that a person could go through, of which it would be, one would be circumcision, then one would say, well, you can now become part of that nation by being circumcised and then following all the customs of that nation, because the whole blessing and all the protection of that nation is found in one law and in one system of justification that would justify you with the power and the rule of that nation. And that would be, you have to be a part of a certain ethnic group. So that is the kind of thing that was taking place here. The Jews believed that the blessing was only to the descendants of Abraham. So in order to be a descendant of Abraham, there's not much you can do about it, but to be a descendant through just normal genealogy, part of just who your parents and grandparents was. Then there was a way wherein they believed you could become a Jew, and that was through certain washings and also circumcision. So they tried to tell the Gentiles that you can now, in this freedom that Christ has given us, where we are set free from sin and death and so forth, you've got access to it in being a Jew. So first you're a Jew, and then you believe upon Jesus. And that's how it works. So this is what Paul was addressing in Galatians. It's not something that we are familiar with even today. Yet we think that when you are in the flesh is when you do something wrong, or when you buy yourself a nice hamburger or a nice car. That means you are now in the flesh. When we look at Galatians chapter 5, we find being in the flesh being something completely different than indulging in the flesh. It simply means to indulge in the Jewish practices of circumcision and the laws and so forth. The reason why Paul says that we should not do that, or the people in Galatia should not do that, they should not be tricked into that, is because of the effect that would have on a person's life. The effect that would have on a person is clearly mentioned from verse 19 onwards. It says the acts of the flesh are obvious. It's sexual immorality, impurity, debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, and so forth. So what he's basically saying is from the time that the Jews started to follow the law, or wanted to be justified by the law, let me rather use those words, we find all the fruit that came forth in their lives. And that was idolatry and, so many disobediences, so many things that just destroyed their lives. So when we are thinking of not using our liberty to indulge the flesh, we should think of it along the lines that Paul was mentioning it. And what Paul was simply saying is, don't use the freedom of grace and only direct it towards one people group, and then say that unless you're part of that people group, blessing cannot be yours. That's what it is. Thank you so much that I could minister this message to you, and I trust that it will bring some clarity as pertaining to what the specific passage in question means. God bless.